Mimic in its present incarnation, certainly stylistically, is a movie of mine. And everybody says to me, well, do you dislike Mimic? And I say, I don't dislike Mimic. What hurts me is what I wanted to do. In the same way that I maintain that some of the best movies I have are the movies I have not made, the screenplays that never got financed. Mountains of Madness, or Mephisto's Bridge, or Monte Cristo. You know, the ones that get away, like any fisherman, are the biggest fishes. In the 70s, I read a book that neatly classified horror in two kinds. The first kind of horror is the horror where something from outside attacks the group. And the second kind of horror is the horror that comes from within the group. Other than that, then you have infinite subcategories after that. I mean, there are thematic, almost subgenres: haunted house, ghost story, monster movie, Frankenstein monster. It can be many others, and it can cross-pollinate with sci-fi. You know, but ultimately it's about the man-made monsters.
Oh my God.
What I liked about the Mimic short story was that it was a reveal. It was not starting, it started almost like Rear Window, you know, the Alfred Hitchcock movie. It was about a guy spying on a neighbor, a very strange, lanky overcoat man, you know, and then at the end, it was the excursion into that neighbor's apartment and finding a pod of young ones and opening them, and all these little black creatures come out, like looking like men in overcoats, and then fly out. They fly out the window. That was a reveal. It really attracted me. The moment those things opened up and you went, they are the bugs, you know. And mind you, you may know that from the start and so forth, but the moment is still thrilling. In the movie, we combined that moment with the moment where Mira Sorvino is kidnapped by it. So it was a really good way of addressing the emotional thrill, the jolt that you felt reading the story. Suspense is practically has to exist since inception. In other words, 90% of the suspense is what you are withholding from the audience or you are withholding from the character. In the case of suspense is you need to have the audience know what's going on, but the character is unaware. It's almost a lost art. I mean, I really think that very few people are doing suspense movies, and very few people maintain the suspense in movies, because the studios are so eager for the audience to understand the movie, as if it was a fucking thesis or a manual. They don't need to understand the movie, they need to live the movie, correct? I mean, when is the last time you understood a movie and said it was great because you understood it? You know, I say fuck that shit. But suspense depends on them cleanly being able to read it. That's easy, but emotionally being able to hold. When you are executing as a director, suspense is all about holding the frame and not cutting when people want to cut. A cut is a release. Every time you cut, you release. And it's almost like fishing. Not cutting is reeling them in. And every time you cut, you give them a little bit. You know? So it's about that rhythm. Release, not release.
Oh, God.
What's the problem?
I think it's a kid.
Mimic is a very straight B-movie idea, which is monsters that are created. When you get a concept that is a B concept, you need to try and execute it like an A movie in terms of how delicate the art direction needs to be, even if the moments themselves are still genre. You can trace that more in my Spanish language movies than you can in my American movies. I try to execute it as preciously as possible in terms of the image design. I ask and demand or present ideas that are not what you would expect. And with Mimic, we had no time. It's far more straightforward. And I think in some aspects it benefited from that. It didn't get mannered in a way that got in the way of its genre needs, and I like that. But we tried to have humans mimicking the mimics and asking the question that is essential to the things I do, which is, what is it that makes us human? And the answer I give is always the same, it's choice.
Joey, listen to me. They have Jesus on the cross, but that is not a holy place.
There was a whole subplot in the movie about our time being over, that the insects were not an anomaly, they were God's plan. And Manny used to say, maybe it's not our time anymore, maybe God has favored the next creature. The idea that is just the scientific experiment was not attractive to me. I was attracted to the fact that almost like a fairy tale or a biblical idea of God saying, you know what, I'm done with you guys. I'm gonna give these guys a chance. And to that ending, the original ending in the screenplay that I loved also, before the ending of her coming out the stairs and all that, the male came out and finally reformed because it was open. It looked like a bug. And then it survived the subway, and it started walking towards Amira in all 6 legs, and then started standing up, and the legs folded and the faceplate folded, and you realize it was lit by a passing light of a train, and you saw a perfect naked human silhouette. And he came out of the shadows, and you saw a perfect human face, not like the other mimics. He had a perfect human face, and he approached Mira and pointed at her with a perfectly formed digit and say, leave. And I thought that was so scary, and the studio thought it was so not scary. And that is a battle I am sorry we lost, but the idea that what is really scary is not an explosion, it's not a bug. What I find scary is that they were now intelligent, and they were now capable of saying, you can leave. We have restored the shreds of those thematic things. You can spot them in the movie. We have restored the idea of humans exploiting humans with absolute no regard with the sweatshop beneath the church. We have restored the idea of the dark angels by the Chinese workers. We restored the idea of the mole people beneath the city, also living like bugs and leaving markings, essentially saying the guys in charge are now the bugs, At the end of the movie, I was shooting the attack on the subway car where the bug gets split in half. And I saw the saturated ambers, and I saw the saturated blue, and I saw the deep blacks and the texture, the rotting, rich texture in the car. And I saw the fear in Charles Dutton's eyes, and I felt that's the movie. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the movie visually that I wanted to make. It's free of second unit crap, almost 95%, so all you get is first unit crap. So if you hate the first unit crap, I'm the guy. Come talk to me. And you say to me, you hated it, I'll assume it, because this incarnation I own. I really say, this is the movie I wanted. The first thing you hear in Hollywood that should give you a shudder is when they say the rules. We want to understand the rules. By that, they mean that in order to play a game with the audience, they have to know the rules. And I disagree. I think that internal logic in a movie means that things just have to make sense in the tale. What studios make of the rules is they actually kind of want to castrate that stuff and fit it in little neat boxes, and tell you how it is. They want to give you A to B to C to D to E. That is horrible. But fairy tale logic gives you A and C and assume you don't need B, and it gives you E and assumes you know D. That's much better. That's internal logic. The rules are the castration of internal logic. They are the systematization, unnecessarily, of internal logic. It's creating a manual for the movie. And that destroys it. And is I must say, that's one of the battles that sooner or later one has to have in every movie done in Hollywood, where you say, well, these are the rules,
You better be careful how you speak to people.
I really think the moments that were forced and then accepted by me, because it's impossible for a filmmaker to say, I didn't have any other choice. That's cowardice. You always have the choice of not being there, of saying goodbye, in any way you want, amicable or not. But that has to be an extreme situation for that to happen. And every change I accepted, I thought would not destroy the movie I was making, which was a movie that was texturally, visually very beautiful, and with moments of fear and the introduction of creatures that were biologically correct. Hopefully, when you do a movie that responds to the model you wanted to make the movie, it changes. Herodotus, the philosopher, maintained that life is about flow, and that ultimately you never bathe in the same river twice, because the water is moving, and it's flow. And I think that movies are like that. When you meet a movie and you're 15 and you think it's the greatest movie on earth, and you watch it again at 30 or 40 and you go, what the hell was I thinking? Or the opposite, you meet it at 20 and you say with enormous certainty, what a horrible movie. And then you meet it at 40 and you go, what the hell was I thinking? This is a great movie. I'm hoping that if the movies are seen more than once, you will have a different experience. Because even if the movie was not capable of change, which I tried to make them capable of change, you would have changed. And if not, you will notice new things in the movie. It's not about subconscious. I think that people make too much about it, like it really implants a message and we are manipulated like robots. But I do think that you do catch a lot of things just visually. And you get into a rhythm and a language and an atmosphere, and it's important to codify it. Not because you want to explain it on the DVD or in the Blu-ray, I did this, I did that. Well, no, hopefully it had an effect in Pan's Labyrinth or Devil's Wagon, or to some degree in the more commercial movies. But I think that at the end of the day, we managed to preserve the movie I wanted to make as much as it's ever gonna be.